My advice is going to be from the perspective of the entrepreneur who is bootstrapping their business. Mm-hmm. And it is to crawl before you walk and walk before you run. I think it's really important to not grow too fast, to keep this gradual pace, because it's not just growing a business is about figuring out how you can sustain the business, and every step of growth makes the stability of the business, it reduces the stability of the business. You have to grow into that larger business so that you are on top of it and you can then get to the next level.
Everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, feel free to go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time with us to chat. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Steve Preda. Is it right?
Preda, yeah.
Preda. Close as I'm going to get. So give you a quick background on Steve. So since the age of 10, always wanted to be an entrepreneur, was a bit inspired by his grandpa that was a baker in Budapest. Parents were both professionals and wanted him to become one as well. And then went to college, graduated, came up with the idea for a board game, graduated, got a job, went to work for, I think, big banks for a period of time, and then put the board game aside. Did that or worked for the big banks for about 10 years. And then there was some downsizing that got let go with. And best thing that could have happened to him, in his own words, so to speak, got fired on Friday and opened his business on Monday, had his clients that started to come in, became a market leader, and then got hit with the EU crisis a bit in 2011. So decided to come to the US, then got into, or had someone that wanted to buy his business, had a few things and went along with there, came back and then did business coaching. So with that much as a brief or quick introduction, welcome on the podcast, Steve.
Thank you, Devin. Great to be here. But I mean, you told my whole story, so maybe we can wrap this up right here.
There we go. We'll just leave on a high note and call it a day. So, no, I gave the brief overview, but now let's go back in time and talk a little bit about your journey and a little bit how you got started at 10 years old and getting inspired with your grandpa as a baker in Budapest.
Okay, so a small corrections. It wasn't my grandpa, it was my great-grandpa. So I never actually met with him, but he was a baker in pre-Second World War Hungary, and he built, it was a small business, but it was like 20 employees. Actually, just a week ago, I got a picture from a distant relative of the whole team, and in front of the ovens. It's actually pretty cool. So yes, he was the entrepreneur and he became successful, but then with the nationalizations after the war, the family lost the business, and my parents became professionals, and I always felt like that I was not going to work in an office job where I'm constricted and put in a box. I always like this no limit existence idea, where you can make of yourself whatever you want. And I had this board game idea when I was around 21 years old, when we had the change of the regime. We went from communism in Hungary to a multi-party democracy, and I had this board game idea, which was a version of Monopoly for communist countries. And so instead of buying property, you would nationalize and confiscate property from other players. So there were more ways of losing your property, but this never took off because I got the job. I got a scholarship in the Netherlands, and I went to London to work there for a few years with KPMG, big accounting firm, and then I got back and got into banking. And my entrepreneurial story starts when I was 35 years old, and I was running this mergers and acquisitions department in this bank. And we were just, I took over this department maybe 9 months previously, and started to build up the pipeline. And just when things were starting to take off, the bank went through a softer summer, and they realized that they needed to cut costs to make their numbers. And they looked at the payroll, and I was one of the higher paid employees, so they pushed me out. And first, it was a big shock, but within hours, I realized that this was a huge opportunity for me, because for the previous several years, I had to put my entrepreneurial plans on ice because I had this career, so to say, career. I was well paid. I was on this management track, and the opportunity cost was too big for me to switch. And suddenly, with being fired from the bank, the opportunity cost was gone, and I no longer had to make this painful decision of putting my family at risk, of not having this, salary coming in every morning, every month. So that was when I started running my business, and we had a good run. One thing I'd like to mention: around 2004, I stumbled upon a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, which I'm sure, Devin, you read it, and many of our listeners probably read it, which is basically a recipe for how to turn a small business into a growing, thriving enterprise.
Well, let me just dive in really quick, because I just had one before we lose or go too far down the hole, or too far into the future. So you were working for a big bank at the time, and that was a stable or a good job, or you did it for the stability for 10 years or so. When you did get downsized, I think one of the things that you said was basically you got fired on Friday and opened your business on Monday, and how did you that's a pretty quick turnaround to open up a business, get it going, and try and have clients follow you and everything else. So how did you over that quick transition, when you got or let go, was to say, okay, I've always wanted to do my own business, I'm going to do it now, I'm not going, rather, because you could have also gone and applied to other jobs, you could have gone and got hired from someone else, you could have taken a bit of time or anything else, rather than just within the matter of a weekend opening up your business. So how did you kind of make that decision that this was your opportunity to go chase down your own thing and get going on it?
Well, actually, so I can replay the whole weekend for you if you want, but the sequence of events was, so I got my pink slip around 5 p.m. on Friday, and I made some calls, and my first reaction was, and my team basically said, hey, we are with you. If you're leaving, then we're going to leave with you. And I made some calls, and the first idea was to basically the whole team to walk over to another bank. And it turned out that they talked to two banks through connections, and turned out that they were not going to be able to make a quick decision on this. So this was kind of a pending thing. And then in the meantime, my second in command got summoned into the office of the senior vice president, who was my boss. And basically, they took my car, they gave him my car, they gave him a big bump on his salary. And essentially, he was off. From that moment, he decided that he was not going to leave. So this idea was mute of us working out as a team. And then, I had basically the weekend to figure out what I was going to do. And we had 4 clients at the time in the department. It was like five of us in the department, and we had 4 clients. And one of the clients was ready to walk over to me within a matter of days. And then the second client came over as well within a couple of weeks. And I was a little bit pissed off with this whole firing. So I kind of resolved to myself that I was going to get the other 2 clients as well, just to prove my point that they should have fired me. And actually they also came over. So by within 6 months, both of the other clients came over, and I got my little revenge. But essentially, all I needed was a computer. I walked across the street. A friend of mine let him his apartment that was vacant for the time being for like $100 a month. So I got started. I called one of the computer guys from the office whom I was friendly with, and he came over and he fixed up my computer, and I was off to the races. So that's what happened.
Sounds like a very productive weekend, or a productive few days. So now that you did that, and you were getting into, you got the business, you got the business open within the matter of a few days, got your first few clients, and now you have the opportunity to kind of build your business, or take that leap of faith and actually go out on your own. How did it go for you? Was it a raving success and continue to build it from there? Was it the ups and the downs, or kind of how did that go as you now were out on your own and running the business?
So the first thing was, first thought I had when I started the business was that all I wanted to do was to cover my salary. So basically I thought, okay, so I'm not going to get this paycheck. So what would it take for me to get just as much business so that I cover my salary? So I'm at least where I was before, so we don't have to cut our lifestyle or anything like that. And that was pretty quick. So that happened, within a month, basically. And then I thought, okay, so what do I do? So maybe I need a real office, not just this apartment. Maybe I hire someone. I took some subscriptions out. So suddenly, within a month or two, my expenses started to build, and I realized that my salary was not enough because I had to cover the expenses as well. So within 2 months, I realized that I had to actually double my salary as a revenue just to cover my expenses. And then another 2 months later, I realized that I had to triple it, and it kept growing because the more things I did, obviously, the more I became a business, not just a salary. It was other costs to cover. So that was the first thing. And the other thing was that about 6 months into the business, I basically burned through my Rolodex. I called everyone I knew that I could have kind of enticed to become a client. And then I realized that, wow, this is a new phase. It's no longer personal connections. Now I have to figure out how I promote this business, how I market my business. And that was a big mindset shift. And I realized that if I can't do that, then I'm going to be back in a job within 6 months. So I really have to break that knot. And basically, I started calling people. I started, cold calling people, and looked at newspapers, and if there were articles about companies growing, that I gave them a call, and I managed to get clients. And then we latched on. And by that time, that was basically about 6-9 months later, I had 2 employees or associates, and at that time there was a program that started, which was the capital injection program. It's like the SBA, an organization in Hungary, like the SBA, started this program of helping small to medium-sized businesses with minority capital injection. So we started working on this, and we became very successful because we were one of the first teams that figured out how to apply for these capital projects, and we got quite a few clients, and we closed a few deals. So that was we had a really good run the next year. And then we had to pivot, because about 18 months into running my business, around the end of 2004, the person who ran the department in this government-owned bank who were dispersing these loans, he kind of, I think it was a personal jealousy. He was kind of my age, and we went to college at the same time, and we were in similar circles. And he was head of the Venture Capital Association, and I think he didn't like me kind of dominating these projects and making a lot of money, and he basically told his team to stop working with MB Partners, our firm. So suddenly we lost our breadwinning product, and we had to pivot, and we started doing trade M&A, selling companies to strategic investors. At that time, there were not too many private equity groups in Hungary to sell these businesses, so strategic buyers. And the first deal that we were going to do, it was a stationery distribution company. It's a nice little company. They had maybe 5 million revenue, $1 million of profit, and we were very, very excited. We put out this teaser, and we had a handful of businesses making offers, and one of them who signed a proposal, they came over to do due diligence. And the morning of the due diligence, we walked into the company, and the CEO called me in, and he said, Steve, we have a problem. So, what do you mean? Well, actually, the problem is that our warehouse is nearly empty, even though we have a lot of inventories on our books, but we actually don't have this inventory. We only inflated them because we didn't want the bank to call the loan. We are actually making losses as opposed to profits. And unfortunately, when these guys going to show up for the due diligence, they're going to see a half-empty warehouse. So I just wanted to warn you so that you know that. So thank you very much. So these investors came in, and it was the most humiliating experience I had. Basically had to confess that the books are cooked, and this company is probably not for them, and they already hired the accountants. They were very upset with us. So that was a big lesson for me to do my own due diligence when I sign a client up. It's not enough to just take the money and figure out what you do afterwards. It's better to know who your client is, and that you don't deal with crooks.
That is always good words of wisdom, that you don't deal with crooks. So now you do that, and you build up the business, you go through the ups and the downs, and you hit I think then at one point you kind of hit the EU downturn, right? Or the EU crisis back in 2011. How did that impact things, or how did you pivot or adjust, or where did that send you along your journey?
So we had a good run, and 2007 was the best year ever for us, and I was very confident that we can double the business next year. I had a bunch of people. We got a lot of deals. We had like 6 deals under due diligence in the summer, and then the eurozone crisis hit, and it was a shock because just a few years earlier. Maybe I'm confusing the two. So we had a good run. In 2008, we had this big dip, and we recovered from it. But it was really tough. I had to downsize my team and almost went out of business. And then we recovered. And then the eurozone crisis, like another dip, happened. And we were down at the Lake Balaton, which is like a big lake in Hungary, with my wife and kids, and on vacation. And you're looking at the news, what was happening, and banks were going out of business, countries were going down the drain. And my wife and I looked at each other and said, are we going to wait for strike 3? We had the financial crisis, the Lehman-induced financial crisis. We have the eurozone currency crisis. Maybe there's a third one. Shall we wait for this, or shall we make a move? So, started researching options. We looked at different countries, Australia, the UK, Canada. Eventually decided to come to the US. And next, that was like late August, September. And then the next spring, as we were figuratively, packing our luggage to come over here, I got this call from this guy called Christian, who was running a private equity group in Budapest. And he offered to basically merge our businesses, become partners, become a merchant banking operation, and kind of expand in the region. And I was very touched, I was very impressed and very happy that he thought about me to merge. But I told him that, listen, we committed to make this move, so I cannot be your partner. However, it's kind of good timing. If you want to buy my business, why don't you give me an offer? So a week later, I got this offer. I got the email, I opened it up, and I could not believe what I saw. So basically, to summarize the offer, it was that, Steve, your business is worth zilch, but I'm happy to buy your fancy furniture and your computers. And I'll pay you a commission for all the deals that you have in the hopper. But you're the chief cook and bottle washer in the business. You're the face of the company. You do the marketing. You're the CEO. You've got all the investor connections. You get the clients. So without you, we don't have a business. And kind of he had a point. It was very painful because I had been teaching all those companies how to make themselves viable so they can go and find an investor. And then when it was my turn, it turned out that the emperor had no clothes. So it was very, very painful. And but then I started, we moved here anyway, and I figured out that the problem was that I was not delegating, I was not empowering my team. And I stumbled upon another book. So I mentioned the E-Myth, which is kind of a management blueprint, I call them. I stumbled upon another management blueprint, Traction, from Gino Wickman. And I started implementing the tools and empowering my team and, basically stepping back from day to day. I was here in Virginia and just going back every 3 weeks just to make sure everything's okay. But my team took from me and they got really excited and they ran with it. And within a year, Christian came back and he told me that, he saw that the business was working and my team was executing and I was not here. And obviously it's more than just a one-man show. And I managed to do a deal and sold the business and moved over here. Now, why it's important? Because this book that you saw behind me, Buyable, is about this idea of being caught with your pants down like I was with an unviable business. So I wouldn't want other entrepreneurs to live through that. And there is a way to avoid that. It's by making your business viable. So this book is about how to make your business viable.
No, and I think that's awesome. So a lot of what you've kind of learned from when you went to sell your business and they basically got told, well, it's not worth a whole lot other than the physical assets because you built it around yourself so much that you leave, the business kind of shuts down to now this is how you set up the business so that it is viable, that people can come in, they can take over and it has that value to it. So I think that's great. So now if you, since you've done the book and since you transitioned there, do you still run any of the businesses, still do any of that? Or is it now primarily shifted over to more business coaching and the book or the book area?
Yeah. So when I came over here, I started set up an office. So the initial idea was to continue the investment banking business here. And I had a couple of clients, but I realized that it was a big climb to build a business because I had no connections here whatsoever, to build a business which is very transaction driven and where not every deal closes. And it's a success-driven thing. So I would have had to build quite a big machine to have some kind of a stability of cash flow. So we decided not to do that. And I started working with leadership teams and I started implementing the entrepreneurial operating system that Traction describes that I implemented in my business and other management blueprints. And Buyable is basically, it gives you the framework to how to figure out what you need to do with your company to live your ideal life, what it takes for you to get there. So what is your magic number? What is the value of your business? Where do you have to take your business? And then implement a management blueprint like Traction, like EOS or the E-Myth, and orchestrate your business so that it's self-managing, it's growing sustainably, and it's profitable. And maybe your business is already ready for you to harvest your magic number to do your ideal life. But if not, then the next phase 3, is to instill value drivers in the business. And then when you have grown the business to the appropriate value, then how do you transition? So how do you monetize your business? What will be your role in the business or outside the business? But in the business, there are various roles. An entrepreneur, I've seen entrepreneurs being just a shareholder, being a consultant, working in the business actually without executive authority, just doing the business, or being an advisor or being a board member. So there are different roles and there are pros and cons for each. So I talk about that. And then I talk about the mindset of what's the emotional impact of letting go of your business and how does it feel. And I felt it myself. It was quite difficult because it gives you status, it gives you connections, it gives you relevance, and when that's gone, then you're suddenly just a soul person, not very much leverage. So that's an interesting. That was an interesting experience, and I've seen many entrepreneurs who didn't figure out their end game, what they would do after the end game, and they suffered acutely, and they bought the boat and they went on the vacations, and they realized they didn't like to be on the water anyway, and the boat wouldn't start anyway because they hadn't brought it out of the marina for 6 months. So it's not really a solution. You have to have a compelling future beyond your business and figure that out first, and then reverse engineer the viability process.
Well, awesome. Well, I think that's definitely a fun story to tell, and and a good journey as well. Some great advice. Well, as we wrap up towards the end of the podcast, I always have two questions that we hit on. So let's go ahead and dive on those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
I think the worst business decision was in 2005. After I read the E-Myth, I got so excited. I implemented E-Myth in my business, and then I got so excited about this whole concept of systemizing a business that I thought that I would start a second business doing the systemization. So I started this business. I think the name was Mechanize, or the equivalent of it in Hungary, and I hired someone to run it, and we put a lot of energy into creating this template, this program, and pitching it. At the same time, it was not enough for me. At the same time, I also started a business brokerage operation, because I was reading all these books about business brokerage, and I thought maybe there is, there are a lot more companies, smaller companies that cannot afford investment banking. Maybe we can do a cookie cutter approach for them, and that's going to be a high volume business, and it's going to be very easy. I thought easier to put the transactions together. So I hired another person. We started doing that as well. So suddenly I was running 3 businesses, and the net effect was none of the new businesses took off because they were not quite the right idea, neither of them. And then my legacy business went down because I didn't pay attention. I dropped the ball on it. So essentially I lost 2 valuable employees. One of them was an old friend that I had to let go. So very painful. I had a high flying employee who was one of the most promising one, who I appointed to run the brokerage, and he got burnt out and he left. So I lost him. Plus we started making losses in the investment banking business. So it was a huge mess. And it was just because I wasn't disciplined enough. I thought just because one business is going well, I kind of have the Midas touch, and wherever I get into, it's going to go as well. And lost my focus, and almost ran into trouble. Managed to course correct, but we lost time and attention and money and good people as a result.
Well, I think that that's sometimes, and I tend to even suffer with it a bit as well. As I think a lot of entrepreneurs, you have a lot of what appear at least, and probably a lot of them are good ideas and things are exciting. You catch a new thing, you want to implement it, you want to try some out, start a new business, and that can be great and lead to a lot of opportunities. But if you get kind of the old saying, over your skis, or you get too far ahead of yourself, and or you get things to where you're too strapped on time, you're not able to focus on the core of what you're doing, and then it can actually have that adverse effect as you touched on.
More entrepreneurs go bankrupt because more businesses go out of business because of indigestion rather than starvation. So that's the indigestion situation.
Yep, that's fair. So now let's jump to the second question, which is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you give them?
So I think there are 2 types of advice. If this is a funded business, so someone goes out and it's venture backed, then obviously that's going to be different. So my advice is going to be from the perspective of the entrepreneur who is bootstrapping their business. Mm-hmm. And it is to crawl before you walk and walk before you run. I think it's really important to not grow too fast, to keep this gradual pace, because it's not just growing a business is about figuring out how you can sustain that business, and every step of growth makes the stability of the business, it reduces the stability of the business. You have to grow into that larger business so that you are on top of it and you can then get to the next level. And I think a big mistake is to try to grow too fast. And then you can run out of money, you can run out of the ability to execute. You hire people who are not right, not right for your organization or for your seat. So you get into all sorts of troubles. Jim Collins has this concept of the 20-mile march, and he talks about the story of 1911 or 1919, when the 2 explorer groups, I think 1911, I think it was a 14. Anyway, there were 2 groups trying to get to the Antarctica, and one was Scott, who was a Brit, and there was Amundsen, a Norwegian. And the Brit, he basically, when it was bright weather and good weather, they would march 50 to 70 miles. And when they had bad weather, they basically stayed in their tent to wait for the bad weather to go away. Whereas Amundsen, he had this strategy of 20-mile march. So every day they would get out of their tent, they marched 20 miles, whether it was beautiful weather or terrible weather. They would do that, and they would stop, and they would, goof off, do something else. If it was bad weather, they would still make the 20 miles. So that kept the team, kept the morale high and kept them progressing. And they got there and back with food to spare, while Scott's team basically died. They reached the Antarctica. They were second, so they didn't win the race, and they died on the way back, 20 miles from the next food depot, because they exhausted themselves.
No, so I love that. And I love that idea of, basically, don't exhaust yourself, or, if you are going at such a pace on the business and growing it, or bringing people on or doing other things that you exhausted, that can have a lot of that adverse. So I think that's great advice. Well, just as a quick reminder to people, we do have the bonus question. We'll talk just a little about intellectual property, but for the normal part of the episode, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and want to say thank you, Steve, for coming on. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com. Apply to be on the show. 2 more things as listener. 1, make sure to click subscribe in your podcast player so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. And 2, leave us a review so new people know how to find it, or the awesome episodes as well. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, trademarks, or anything else, just feel free to go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. So now with that, now that we've had your journey, we always got to make the fun transition of we get to switch gears a bit and talk a little bit about intellectual property. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. What is your top intellectual property question?
Yeah, so my question is whether it's possible, how it's possible to trademark a common use word in the English language. So specifically, the title of my book, I know that, as far as I understand, book titles cannot be trademarked, but words sometimes can be trademarked. So, for example, I mentioned your traction, the book. Mm-hmm. The traction word, US Worldwide managed to trademark the traction word, even though it's not a product, it's title of a book. There's other ways to use. They use the traction word, but I'm not clear on how they use it or how they made it. So anyway, long question. What are the ways of turning a common use English word into a trademark without having to necessarily have a product with the same name?
Yeah, so there's a few things to unpack, so I'll try and hit on those. I mean, generally, for a trademark has, or whether it's a word, whether it's a logo, whether it's the name of a product or anything else, it has to be tied to a goods or services that you're offering. And so, in other words, you have to be selling something with that, using the mark. You have to be providing a service, so you can, whether it's a plumbing service, car wash, attorneys, anything else, whatever it is, but it has to be tied with the goods and service, because really what trademarks are intended to do is to associate a goods or services with the source, or be a source identifier. So in other words, I know when I see Coca-Cola that it's going to be sold by the company Coca-Cola, and I know that with that, I know who's selling it, I know what the quality is, I know where it's coming from, and so that's identifying the source of who's buying it. So when you get into trademarks, that's really the first step you have to do. And so the problem you get into is, as we talked a little bit about a book, is if you knew the name of a book, it doesn't necessarily identify who's selling the book, right? If I use a word and you have your book in the background, buyable, it's a great name and it's a great brand, but no, if people aren't going to look and think, okay, the name of that book indicates that here's a person that's selling it, or here's the source of the goods or services, similar to, now there's always an exception. You can do, as an example, Harry Potter as a brand, they built, a series of books, multiple books. They built out a whole brand around the book, such that now when people hear Harry Potter, they think, okay, it's not just a name of a book, but it's a whole name of a series. I know what is going along with it. I know there's previous books. I know it's going to be sold by this. And so you can build it around a book, but it has to be almost more of a series. Otherwise, generally, it's hard just to do it as a name or a title of a book. The other thing you can look at is, if you were to take, for instance, Stephen Covey, which did the 7 Habits of Highly Effective, people, he built a whole franchise around that, but it was really out of not just a book, but also, he took what each of those habits were and he built seminars and webinars and trainings and certifications and all those things. And so while it was kind of centered around a book initially, it branched out to goods and services. So now when you hear the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you don't just think of the book, but you think of all the things that come along that and all the marketing and the branding and everything that came with that. So generally, when you're looking at a trademark, it's, generally, it has to be identify the source of goods or services. It has to be tied to something that's in commerce, whether it's a good or a service. And then the other thing when you look at a trademark is to whether or not it's a trademarkable term is it has to be something that's more than merely descriptive. Meaning, if all you're doing is, if as an example, if you're going out and you wanted to open up a fruit stand and you're going to sell the fruit apples and you named your fruit stand Apple. Well, you wouldn't be able to trademark that because everybody describes the word, the fruit apple as an apple. And so people aren't going to think that that's a source identification. Now, if you go out and start a consumer electronics company with the word Apple, it's not going to be merely descriptive because people don't typically call a smartphone apples because it has nothing to do with the word Apple. So those are kind of a few things as you go along, or the few basics of trademarks with the idea of it has to identify a source of goods and services that you're selling, and then you have to do something that's not merely descriptive. So with that, we'll wrap it up for there. And if you have any other questions on intellectual property, patents, trademarks, or anything else, whether you or any of the listeners, feel free to go to strategymeeting.com. We're always here to chat and answer questions and always here to help. And with that, I wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Devin. It was fun to chat with you. Thank you.